Captain Lee Ji-won sat in her command chair, watching the stars through the viewport of the new dawn. She had been traveling through neutral space for 3 days now, carrying supplies to the outer colonies. Her crew was small, just 15 people, but they were good at their jobs. The ship hummed quietly around them, a peaceful sound that Ji-won had grown to love over her 10 years in space. The peace shattered when the communications officer called out. "Captain, we're receiving a distress signal." "It's from New Busan Colony." Ji-won straightened in her chair. New Busan was one of humanity's newest settlements, home to about 50,000 people. Mostly miners and farmers, people looking for a fresh start away from crowded Earth. "Put it through," she ordered. The message was broken, filled with static, but the words were clear enough. The Velkar were coming. The most feared species in the galaxy had given humanity an ultimatum: surrender the Outer Rim colonies or face destruction. New Busan had 30 days to evacuate. Ji-won felt her stomach tighten. Everyone in the galaxy knew about the Velkar. They were huge reptilian warriors who had conquered half the known worlds. Their empire stretched across thousands of star systems. They had been the dominant power for 3,000 years. No one fought the Velkar and won. No one even tried anymore. She immediately changed course, pushing the new dawn to maximum speed toward New Busan. At the same time, she sent a priority message to Earth Defense Command. They needed to know what was happening. Back on Earth, Ambassador Park Hyun-woo was already in an emergency session of the Galactic Council. The massive chamber was filled with representatives from dozens of alien species. The insectoid Chirrut clicked their mandibles nervously. The crystalline Luminara dimmed their inner light. The aquatic Deepborn kept their breathing masks pressed close. Everyone looked afraid. Park stood at the human podium, his hands gripping the edges tightly. He was a diplomat who had spent 20 years building relationships with other species. He knew how to speak carefully and choose the right words. But right now, careful words felt useless. "The Velkar demand is illegal under council law," Park said, his voice echoing in the chamber. "Humanity has done nothing to provoke this aggression. We have every right to our colonies. We ask the council to stand with us and condemn this action." Silence answered him. The other species looked away or down at their desks. No one spoke. No one offered support. Then the Velkar representative stood. Commander Velkrath was massive, nearly 3 meters tall, covered in dark green scales that looked like armor. His yellow eyes fixed on Park with something that might have been amusement. "The council knows the law of strength," Velkrath said, his voice deep and rumbling. "Humanity is young, weak. You have been in space for barely 50 years. You occupy worlds that could be better used by stronger species. The Velkar Dominion offers you a choice. Submit to our guidance and live as vassals. Refuse, and we will demonstrate why we have ruled this galaxy for millennia." Park wanted to shout back, to argue, but he knew it would do no good. The Velkar had done this before. 47 times they had gone to war with other species. 47 times they had won. They had a pattern. First came the ultimatum. Then came overwhelming force. Then came submission or extinction. "We request time to consider," Park said, though he already knew Earth's answer. 30 days, Velkrath replied. "Then we come for New Busan. Then we come for all your colonies. Then, if necessary, we come for Earth itself." He sat down, clearly considering the matter closed. Park left the council chamber and went directly to a secure communications room. He called the emergency cabinet meeting on Earth. The president, military commanders, and senior advisors all appeared on the screen. "They won't back down," Park reported. "And the council won't help us. Every species here has learned to bow to the Velkar. They're all terrified." On Earth, in a small university office, Dr. Choi Minji was reviewing everything humanity knew about the Velkar. She was a xenobiologist, an expert on alien species, but she also studied their cultures and histories. The government had asked her to join the emergency response team to help them understand their enemy. What she found was not encouraging. The Velkar had evolved on a harsh world where only the strong survived. They believed absolutely in the right of the powerful to rule the weak. Their military tactics were built on intimidation and overwhelming force. They would announce their attacks in advance, letting their enemies feel the dread of certain doom. Then they would strike with such power that resistance collapsed. They had never lost a war. Not in recorded history. Species that fought back were crushed so completely that their names became warnings to others. Species that submitted were allowed to exist as vassals. providing resources and labor to the Velkar Empire. Minji sent her report to the military commanders with a note. They're confident because they've never been challenged successfully. Their entire strategy depends on enemies giving up hope. Captain Jiwon arrived at New Busan 3 days later. The colony was in chaos. Some people were packing, getting ready to evacuate. Others were angry, refusing to leave their homes. She met with the colony governor, a tough woman named Song who had been a miner before taking the leadership role. "We built this place," Governor Song said, gesturing at the settlement outside her office window. "We spent 5 years turning rocks and dirt into farms, into homes. My daughter was born here. You're telling me we have to abandon it all because some alien bully said so?" Jiwon understood the anger. She felt it too. But she also knew what the Velkar could do. "I'm telling you that a Velkar battle fleet can destroy this entire colony in an hour. They have weapons that can crack planets. We're trying to find a solution, but right now, evacuation might be your only chance to survive." Governor Song looked out at her colony, at the people who had trusted her to lead them. "What does Earth say? Are they going to fight? Or are they going to surrender us?" Jiwon didn't have an answer yet. But 3 days later, everyone got their answer. The president of Earth gave a speech that was broadcast across all human colonies and transmitted to every species in the galaxy. It was short, simple, and it changed everything. "The Velkar Dominion has demanded we surrender our freedom. They expect us to bow like every other species has bowed before them. They believe that because they are old and powerful, they have the right to rule us. They are wrong. Humanity did not crawl out of caves, survive ice ages, and reach the stars just to kneel before tyrants. Our answer to the Velkar is this: no, we will not surrender. We will not submit. If they want our colonies, they will have to take them, and we will make them pay for every meter of ground." The message ended with a single word transmitted on all frequencies, in every language, so loud that every ship in the galaxy could hear it. One word that sealed humanity's fate: no. Captain Jiwon watched the broadcast with her crew. Around her, she saw fear on their faces. But she also saw something else: determination, pride. They were terrified, but they were also angry. The Velkar thought humanity would roll over like everyone else. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Commander Velkrath received Earth's response aboard his flagship. He laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. "Foolish primates," he said to his officers. "They choose extinction. Very well. Prepare the second fleet. We will make an example of New Busan that the galaxy will never forget. In 30 days, we show these humans why no one defies the Velkar." His officers saluted and moved to carry out his orders. 200 warships began preparing for battle. It would be, they all believed, a quick and easy victory, just like the 47 wars before. They had no idea what was coming. The Velkar fleet arrived at New Busan exactly 30 days later, just as promised. 200 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the star system. Their ships were massive, covered in thick armor plating that could withstand incredible damage. Each one carried enough firepower to level a city. Private Yoon Dae-hyun stood at his defense post on New Busan's surface, watching the sky through his helmet display. He was 20 years old and had joined the Defense Force only 6 months ago. He had never seen combat before. Now he was looking at the largest invasion fleet in galactic history, and they were coming straight for his home. "All units, this is command," a voice crackled through his helmet radio. "Stay at your positions. Hold your fire until ordered. We're not running. We're not hiding. When they come, we hit them with everything we have." Daehyun gripped his weapon tighter. Around him, other soldiers waited at their posts. Surface-to-air cannons, missile batteries, shield generators. They all knew they couldn't stop 200 warships. But they also knew that people were counting on them. Behind them were the evacuation ships, still loading the last of the civilians. They needed time. In space, Colonel Bae Sun-ho commanded the human defense fleet from the bridge of the destroyer Incheon. He had 40 ships under his command. 40 ships against 200. The numbers made it sound like suicide. Maybe it was. But Sun-ho had spent the last 30 days preparing, and he had a plan. The Velkar followed their traditional tactics. They announced their attack 24 hours before they moved. They wanted humanity to feel the dread, to have time to surrender. Then they advanced in a massive formation, all their ships together in a show of overwhelming power. It was meant to break the enemy's will before the fighting even started. But Sun-ho was not like the enemies the Velkar had faced before. He had studied every battle the Velkar had ever fought. He knew their patterns. He knew their pride. And he knew how to use both against them. All ships, Sunho ordered calmly. Activate stealth systems. Move to positions Alpha through Delta. Wait for my signal. The human ships went dark and cold, hiding among the asteroids that filled the outer system. The Velkar scanners were powerful, but they were not expecting tricks. Why would they? No one had ever ambushed them before. The Velkar fleet moved forward in their traditional wedge formation, with the biggest ships at the front. They were heading straight for New Busan, taking the most direct route. That was their mistake. Ship engineer Kang Sora worked frantically in the engine room of the Incheon. She was trying to modify the ship's experimental plasma cannon, a weapon that had failed every test because it used too much power. The engineers on Earth had declared it too dangerous to use in combat. But Sora did not care about safe anymore. She rerouted power from life support, from shields, from everything that was not essential. The cannon would work. It would probably burn out after a few shots, but it would work. The Velkar fleet reached the point where the asteroid field was thickest. That was when Sunho gave the signal. All units fire at will. Thousands of kinetic mines that had been laid in the asteroids activated simultaneously. They were simple weapons, just chunks of metal accelerated to incredible speeds. But at those speeds, even a small piece of metal could tear through armor like paper. The Velkar front line exploded. 20 ships were crippled in the first 10 seconds. The rest of the formation broke apart in confusion. This was not supposed to happen. The Velkar were the hunters, not the prey. Then the human ships opened fire from their hidden positions. Railguns launched solid slugs at a fraction of the speed of light. Missiles came from a dozen different angles. The Velkar were powerful, but they were not ready for this kind of coordinated ambush. Commander Velkrath screamed orders from his flagship. Return fire. All ships, return fire. Find those human vessels. The Velkar ships began to respond, their massive weapons lighting up space with energy beams and plasma bolts. They were still the stronger force. They had more ships, bigger guns, better armor. But they were confused, angry, and not thinking clearly. Sora's modifications were complete. Captain, she called over the intercom. The plasma cannon is ready, but we'll only get 3 shots before it overheats and burns out. 3 shots, Sunho repeated. Make them count. He targeted the nearest Velkar capital ship, one of their massive cruisers that could carry 5,000 warriors. Fire! The plasma cannon lit up the darkness. A stream of superheated matter crossed the distance in a heartbeat and slammed into the Velkar ship's engines. The cruiser's back half simply ceased to exist, vaporized by the heat. The front half tumbled away, dead in space. 2 shots left, Sora reported. Already working to cool down the weapon, the battle raged for 18 hours. It was chaos. Ships on both sides were destroyed. The Velkar had more numbers, but the humans fought with desperate creativity. They used every trick they could think of. Fake signals to draw ships into traps, damaged ships that turned out to be bombs, ramming attacks when they ran out of ammunition. On the surface of New Busan, Daehyun fired his cannon until the barrel glowed red-hot. Enemy landing craft were trying to break through to the planet's surface. Most were destroyed by the orbital defenses, but some got through. He watched one crash into the colony's edge, kilometers away. Explosions bloomed across the settlement. Keep firing, his sergeant shouted. The evacuation ships are almost loaded. Daehyun kept firing. His hands were shaking. He was terrified. But he did not stop. In space, Sunho made the hardest decision of his life. He had lost 31 ships. The Velkar had lost 89. It was an incredible victory by any measure. But his remaining ships were damaged, low on ammunition, and the Velkar still had over 100 vessels left. If they stayed, they would all die and they would not be able to protect the evacuees. All ships, he ordered quietly, fall back to position Zeta. Cover the evacuation transports. The human fleet retreated in good order, still fighting as they went. The Velkar did not pursue as aggressively as they could have. They were shocked, confused by their losses. No one had ever hurt them this badly before. The evacuation ships carrying 90,000 colonists from New Busan jumped to faster-than-light speed and disappeared to safety. The military vessels followed, leaving the Velkar in control of an empty colony. Commander Velkrath stood on his bridge, looking at the damage reports. 89 ships destroyed. Thousands of warriors dead. The humans had only 40 ships, and they had done this. It was impossible, unthinkable. Recall the fleet, he said quietly. We returned to the Dominion. His officers stared at him. Retreat? The Velkar did not retreat. Now! Velkrath roared. He knew his career was over. The High Command would strip him of his rank for this failure, but he also knew that if he stayed and tried to chase the humans, he might lose more ships, and he could not afford that. The news of the battle spread across the galaxy faster than light. The impossible had happened. Humanity, with only 40 ships, had fought 200 Velkar warships and survived. More than survived. They had won. In the Galactic Council chambers, the other species whispered in shock. The Chirrut clicked their mandibles in amazement. The Luminara brightened with hope. The Deepborn stirred in their tanks. Ambassador Park listened to the reports with a mixture of pride and fear. Yes, they had won the battle. But it was only one battle. The Velkar had thousands of ships. They had a whole empire full of resources. And now humanity had made them angry. On Earth, people celebrated in the streets. They had proven they could fight back. But the military commanders knew better. Admiral Han Jisoo, the supreme commander of Earth's defense forces, watched the celebration on the news with a grim expression. We bloodied their nose, she said to her staff. Now they're going to come back with everything they have. This was just the beginning, she was right. 3 days later, the Galactic Council received a message from the Velkar High Command. Commander Velkrath had been recalled in disgrace. A new commander had been appointed. His name was Veltraxis, and he was known throughout the galaxy by another title, the Unyielding. Veltraxis had never lost a battle in 40 years of warfare. He had personally conquered 12 worlds. He was ruthless, intelligent, and absolutely without mercy. The High Command had given him unlimited authority and access to the full might of the Velkar military. His message to humanity was simple. You have one chance to surrender. If you refuse, I will not stop until Earth is ash and humanity is a memory. You have 7 days to decide. Captain Jiwan, now back at Earth, watched the message with her crew. 7 days. The celebration was over. The real war was about to begin. What do we do? Her communications officer asked. Jiwan thought about the colonists she had helped evacuate. About Governor Song and her daughter. About all the people who had refused to run, who had stayed to fight even when it seemed hopeless. She thought about Daehyun firing his cannon until the barrel melted, about Sora pushing a weapon beyond its limits because they needed every edge they could get. We get ready, Jiwan said, and when they come, we show them what happens when you pick a fight with humans. Admiral Han Jisoo stood in the war room deep beneath Earth's military headquarters. Around the table sat generals, politicians, scientists, and intelligence officers. Everyone looked tired. They had been working for days without sleep, trying to figure out how humanity could possibly survive what was coming. The numbers are clear, General Bae Sunho said, now promoted after the Battle of New Busan. Veltraxis is bringing at least 500 ships, maybe more. We have 300 vessels total, and many of them are damaged from the last fight. If they attack our colonies one by one, we cannot defend them all. If they come straight to Earth, we might hold them off, but our colonies will be undefended. So we've already lost, a politician said bitterly. We made them angry, and now they'll destroy us. No, a quiet voice said from the corner. Everyone turned to look at the speaker. It was Oh Taejin, a civilian professor of military history. He was old, wearing simple clothes, and looked out of place among all the uniforms and suits. But Admiral Han had specifically requested him. Professor Oh, Han said, you told me you had an idea. Now would be a good time to share it. Taejin stepped forward to the table. He pulled up a holographic display showing every major war in human history. Ancient battles with swords and spears, wars with muskets and cannons, modern conflicts with tanks and missiles. What do all these have in common? He asked. They're all about humans fighting other humans, someone said. Exactly, Taejin replied. And what happened when a weaker force fought a stronger one? Sometimes the weak won. How? Not through direct combat, through asymmetric warfare, guerrilla tactics, sabotage, making the enemy pay for every victory until victory becomes too expensive. Intelligence Officer Nam Borum nodded slowly. You're suggesting we don't try to win battles. We try to make the war unwinnable for them. The Velkar have one critical weakness, Taejin continued. Arrogance. They have won so many times that they believe they cannot lose. They fight the same way every time because it has always worked. But we can adapt faster than they can respond. That is our advantage. Borum pulled up her own display. She had been gathering intelligence on the Velkar Empire for months. The professor is right about their weakness. But there is another one. The Velkar rule through fear. They have dozens of vassal species, but those species do not love them. They obey because they believe resistance is impossible. If we can show the galaxy that the Velkar can bleed, can lose, maybe others will find their courage. Admiral Han studied the information carefully. She understood what they were suggesting. Humanity could not win a conventional war. The numbers did not allow it. But they could win a different kind of war. A long, bloody, expensive war where the Velkar paid and paid and paid until they decided humanity was not worth the cost. It means our colonies will suffer, Han said quietly. It means our soldiers will die in raids and ambushes instead of honorable battles. It means we become the monsters hiding in the dark. It means we survive, Taijin replied simply. The plan was approved. While Veltraxus prepared his massive fleet for the assault on Earth, humanity prepared something different. They would not wait for the enemy to come to them. They would take the fight to the Velkar. Captain Li Jiwan volunteered for the first mission. Her ship, the New Dawn, had been repaired and upgraded with stealth technology. She led a small strike force of 6 ships deep into Velkar territory. Their target was a fuel depot that supplied the entire Velkar Second Fleet. They traveled for 2 weeks through unmapped space, avoiding every patrol and sensor grid. It was tense, dangerous work. One mistake would mean death for everyone. But they made it to the depot without being detected. The depot was huge, a space station the size of a small moon. It held enough antimatter fuel to power hundreds of warships for months, and it was barely guarded. Why would the Velkar guard their supply lines? No one had ever been foolish enough to attack them this deep in their own territory. All ships target the fuel storage tanks, Jiwan ordered. Fire on my mark. They fired everything they had. Missiles, railgun slugs, energy beams. The fuel tanks ruptured and antimatter began to leak. When antimatter meets normal matter, the result is pure energy. The explosion was visible from light years away. Jiwan's ship barely made it out before the shockwave hit. They had lost one vessel, but they had succeeded. The Velkar Second Fleet would be stranded without fuel for weeks. Back on Earth, a different kind of battle was being fought. Quan Jun was 17 years old and one of the best computer specialists humanity had ever produced. She led a team of hackers trying to break into Velkar communication networks. It took them 6 weeks, but they did it. Suddenly, human intelligence could read Velkar military transmissions. Better, they could send false information. They made the Velkar think human fleets were in places they were not. They changed supply orders, sending shipments to the wrong locations. They created confusion and doubt. The Velkar tried to fix their security, but every time they did, Jun's team found a new way in. It was a game of cat and mouse, and the humans were winning. Meanwhile, Dr. Choi Minji was working on a different kind of mission. She had made contact with the Chirik, the insectoid species that had served the Velkar as laborers for 600 years. The Chirik were considered weak, not warriors. But Minji did not see them that way. She met with a Chirik representative in secret, in a neutral space station far from Velkar territory. The Chirik's name was Clickthar, and he led a group that dreamed of freedom. "We have dreamed," Clickthar clicked in broken human language. "But dreams do not defeat the Velkar." Minji showed him footage from the Battle of New Busan. Velkar ships burning, Velkar warriors retreating, the impossible made real. "The Velkar are not invincible," Minji said. "They have made you believe they are because it is easier to rule people who have given up hope. But look at this. 40 human ships fought 200 Velkar warships and survived. If we can hurt them, so can you." Clickthar watched the footage over and over. His compound eyes reflected the light of burning Velkar vessels. Something changed in him. An idea that had seemed like fantasy suddenly felt possible. "What would you have us do?" he asked. "Whatever you can," Minji replied. "Slow down their supply ships. Make small mistakes in their factories. Spread the word that the Velkar can be beaten. We cannot win this war alone, but together maybe we all can." The Chirik began their quiet resistance. It was small at first. A shipment delayed here, a manufacturing defect there. Nothing obvious. But across dozens of worlds, these small acts of defiance added up. For 3 months, humanity waged this new kind of war. They attacked supply lines and communication stations. They spread misinformation and doubt. They turned the Velkar's own size against them, making their vast empire a weakness instead of a strength. Veltraxus grew furious. He had assembled his fleet of 500 warships. but he could not launch his attack on Earth because his forces kept being disrupted. His ships needed fuel that did not arrive. His intelligence reports contradicted each other. His vassal species were suddenly clumsy and inefficient. He knew the humans were behind it. He knew they were not fighting honorably, but he did not know how to stop them. Every time he concentrated his forces to hunt down a human raiding party, they struck somewhere else. Every time he secured a position, it turned into a trap. The Velkar High Command was growing impatient. They had expected Veltraxis to crush humanity quickly. Instead, the war was dragging on, costing resources and making the Velkar look weak. "Enough," Veltraxis finally declared. "The humans hide like cowards. They refuse to face us in honorable combat. Very well, I will take the fleet directly to Earth. I will ignore their tricks and their traps. I will end this war by destroying their homeworld." It was exactly what humanity had been hoping for. Admiral Han received the intelligence that Veltraxis was finally moving. She smiled grimly. "He's angry. Good. Angry enemies make mistakes." General Bay looked at the projected path of the Velkar fleet. 500 ships heading straight for Earth. Even with all their preparations, this would be the hardest battle humanity had ever fought. "We've bought ourselves time," Bay said. "We've weakened them. But now comes the real test. Can we actually stop them?" "We have to," Han replied. "Because if we fail here, there is no second chance." Ambassador Park sent one final message to the Galactic Council. "The Velkar are coming to Earth with 500 warships. They intend to make an example of us, to show the galaxy what happens to species that resist. But we will not surrender. We will not bow. And when this battle is over, the galaxy will see that the age of Velkar dominance is ending. We ask only that you remember what happens here. Remember that the Velkar could be defeated, and perhaps someday you will find your own courage." The message was heard on 1,000 worlds. In secret, in the dark, other species began to hope. If humanity could stand against the Velkar, maybe there was a chance for everyone. Captain Jiwan returned from her latest raid to find Earth preparing for invasion. The planet's orbit was filled with defense stations and weapon platforms. The moon had been turned into a fortress. Every ship that could fight had been called back. She reported to Admiral Han on the command station. "The fleet is ready," Jiwan said. "But we all know the numbers." The Velkar Armada arrived in the Sol system like a storm. 500 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of human space. Their formation stretched across millions of kilometers. A wall of metal and death advancing toward Earth. Defense Coordinator Lim Seojin watched from Earth Defense Command as the enemy fleet appeared on the screens. He had spent 3 months turning the entire star system into a fortress, but looking at those numbers still made his stomach tight. 500 ships, the largest military force ever assembled in known history. "All defensive positions report ready," his assistant said. "Orbital platforms are fully powered. Lunar batteries are armed. Asteroid field installations are standing by." Seojin nodded. They had done everything they could. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter bristled with hidden weapons. Jupiter's moons hid military installations. Saturn's rings concealed minefields. Even Earth's moon had been hollowed out to house massive railgun batteries. The entire solar system was a trap waiting to spring. But would it be enough? Fighter pilot Song Hana sat in her cockpit on the orbital platform designated Echo 3. She was 24 years old and had been flying combat missions for 2 years. Around her, 200 other fighters were preparing to launch. They would be the first wave, the fastest and most mobile defense. "All pilots, this is Admiral Han." The voice came through her helmet speakers. "You know what we face. You know the numbers. But remember this, they may have more ships, but we have more heart. We fight for our homes, our families, our future. They fight because they have always won. Today we teach them that winning streaks can end. Good luck and good hunting." Hana checked her weapons one last time. Missiles full. Railgun charged. Shield generator online. She was as ready as she would ever be. Her hands were steady on the controls. Fear was there, but so was determination. On Earth's surface, Kim Minho stood at his post manning one of the ground-based anti-ship batteries. He was 19 years old, a volunteer who had joined the Defense Force after the evacuation of New Busan. He had trained for 3 months for this moment. Now it was here and he felt surprisingly calm. "First wave incoming," the targeting computer announced. "Enemy fighters launching from capital ships. Estimated count 4,000. 4,000 enemy fighters against 200 human defenders. Mino felt his calm slip a little. But then he remembered something his instructor had said during training. They're used to enemies who give up. Show them you won't quit and they won't know what to do. The battle began. Hana launched with her squadron, accelerating toward the Velkar fleet at maximum speed. The enemy fighters came to meet them in a massive swarm. The Velkar pilots were good, well-trained and experienced, but they flew in predictable formations following standard tactics. Human pilots did not follow standard tactics. They broke formation immediately, each one moving independently, making themselves harder to target. They used the orbital platforms as cover, drawing enemy fighters into kill zones. They were outnumbered 20-1, but they were not trying to win a fighter battle. They were trying to buy time and create chaos. Hana shot down 3 enemy fighters in the first minute. Then her shields took a hit and she had to dive behind an orbital platform for cover. Enemy fire tore through the space where she had been. She came around the other side and fired again, destroying another Velkar fighter before it could react. The main fleets engaged. The Velkar capital ships opened fire with their massive energy weapons. Beams of superheated plasma crossed millions of kilometers, striking the human defensive platforms. Shields flared and died. Armor melted. 3 platforms were destroyed in the first volley. Admiral Han stood on the bridge of Earth's command station, watching the battle unfold. She did not flinch as explosions lit up the screens. All orbital batteries return fire. Target their forward cruisers. Make them pay for every meter they advance. Human railguns opened fire. Solid slugs accelerated to incredible speeds, each one carrying the kinetic energy of a nuclear weapon. They slammed into Velkar shields, cracking them, breaking through. Ships that had seemed invincible started taking damage, but the Velkar kept coming. That was their way. They had the numbers to absorb losses. They would grind down the human defenses through pure, overwhelming force. General Bei Sunho commanded the human fleet from the Incheon, now repaired and upgraded. He had 300 ships, spread throughout the solar system in carefully planned positions. The Velkar expected all the defenders to be near Earth. They were wrong. All ships begin Phase 2, Bei ordered calmly. Close the trap. Human vessels emerged from hiding spots throughout the system. Ships that had been powered down behind asteroids suddenly activated. Vessels hiding in the shadow of Jupiter's moons began their attack runs. The Velkar found themselves being shot at from multiple directions. It was chaos. Beautiful, deadly chaos. Exactly what humanity needed. On the surface, Minho fired his battery again and again. Enemy landing craft were trying to break through to Earth's atmosphere. Most were destroyed by the orbital defenses, but some got through. He watched through his targeting scope as one crashed into the ocean, kilometers away. Another exploded over a city, its burning wreckage lighting up the sky. Keep firing, his commander shouted. Do not let them land. The battle raged for hours. Ships on both sides were destroyed. The Velkar were taking heavy losses, far more than they had expected. But they had the numbers. Slowly, inevitably, they were pushing toward Earth. Admiral Han knew this would happen. The Velkar had always fought this way, using their superior numbers to wear down defenders. But she had studied their history. She knew their patterns. And she knew that the Velkar commander always led from the center of the formation, in the largest flagship. It was a symbol of their courage, their willingness to face danger. It was also a weakness. All units, Han said quietly into the fleet-wide channel. Target the flagship. Everything we have. All at once, General Bei understood immediately. It was a desperate gambit. Focusing all their fire on one target meant leaving other areas vulnerable. But if they could kill Veltraxis, if they could cut off the head of the snake, the Velkar formation might collapse. You heard the Admiral, Bei ordered. Every ship capable of firing target the enemy flagship. We only get one chance at this. Captain Jiwon received the order aboard her ship. She looked at her crew. They were exhausted, their ship was damaged, their shields were failing. But they all nodded. One more fight. One more push. Engineering, Jiwon said to Kang Sora. I need everything you've got. Can we make one more attack run? Sora checked her systems. The engines were overheating. The weapons were nearly depleted. The hull was breached in 3 places. We can make one run, she said. But I don't know if we'll be able to get away after. Then we make it count, Jiwon replied. She turned her ship toward the Velkar flagship. Around her, dozens of other human vessels did the same. They all knew what this meant. Many of them would not survive. But if they could end this war, if they could save Earth, it would be worth it. The Velkar flagship was a monster, 5 kilometers long, covered in weapons and armor. It had shields that could withstand incredible punishment. Veltraxis stood on its bridge, watching the human ships turn toward him. He smiled. The humans were getting desperate. Good. Desperate enemies made mistakes. Then every human ship fired at once. Hundreds of missiles, dozens of railgun slugs, energy beams, plasma torpedoes, everything humanity had left. All of it focused on one target. The Velkar flagship's shields lit up like a star, absorbing hit after hit. The shields were strong, the best in the galaxy, but even the best shields have limits. Captain Ji-won pushed her ship to maximum speed, heading straight for the flagship. Her weapons were empty. She had nothing left to fire, except the ship itself. Crew to escape pods, she ordered. Go now! Her officers hesitated. Captain, you need to come too. Someone needs to keep the ship on course, Ji-won replied. Go, that's an order. They went. Ji-won sat alone on the bridge, watching the Velkar flagship grow larger in her viewport. The shields were failing. She could see it flickering, weakening under the sustained fire. She thought about Governor Song and her daughter from New Busan, about all the people who had trusted humanity to protect them, about Private Yoon Dae-hyun firing his cannon until the barrel melted, about everyone who had given everything in this war. For Earth, Ji-won whispered. Then she crashed her ship into the Velkar flagship's shield generator. The shields collapsed completely. Every other human weapon that had been waiting for this moment fired. The flagship's armor was thick, but without shields it was vulnerable. Explosions tore through the massive vessel. On the flagship's bridge, Veltraxis felt his ship dying around him. It was impossible. He was the unyielding. He had never lost. The Velkar did not lose, but he was losing. These humans, these young upstart primates, were destroying everything he had built his life around. All ships, he tried to order, but the communications were down. All ships, continue the attack. We cannot. The bridge exploded. Veltraxis died, still believing it was impossible. Without their commander, the Velkar fleet faltered. Their rigid hierarchy collapsed into confusion. Ships that had been advancing suddenly stopped, waiting for orders that would never come. 3 months after the Battle of Earth, Ambassador Park Hyun-woo stood once again before the Galactic Council, but everything had changed. The chamber that had once been filled with fearful, silent representatives now buzzed with conversation. The other species no longer looked away when he approached. They watched him with something between respect and uncertainty. Park took his place at the human podium. He looked different too. Older, more tired. He had lost friends in the war. Everyone had lost someone. But he stood straight and proud as he prepared to speak. The council speaker, a Luminara named Thal, whose crystalline body glowed with soft blue light, called the session to order. Ambassador Park, the council recognizes Earth. We understand you bring news of the Velkar situation. I do, Park replied. As you all know, the Velkar fleet was defeated at Earth 3 months ago. Their commander Veltraxis was killed in battle. Since then, the Velkar Dominion has been in chaos. This was an understatement. The truth was much more dramatic. The Velkar Empire was falling apart. 50 worlds that had been vassals for centuries were in open rebellion. The Chirrut had declared their independence and were fighting Velkar forces across a dozen systems. The Deepborn had reclaimed their homeworld. Even species that had served the Velkar for generations were finding their courage. The galaxy was burning with revolution, and it was all because humanity had proven something everyone thought was impossible. The Velkar could lose. The chamber doors opened and a new figure entered. He was Velkar, but younger than Velkrath or Veltraxis had been. His scales were lighter green, his movements less arrogant. He wore no weapons and walked alone, without guards. Council speaker, the young Velkar said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. I am Velkaris, peace envoy of the Velkar Dominion. I request permission to address this assembly. The chamber fell silent. No one had ever seen a Velkar request permission for anything. They had always demanded, commanded, taken. This was something new. Speaker Thal considered for a moment, then nodded. The council recognizes peace envoy Velkaris. Velkaris walked to the center of the chamber. He looked at all the species around him, many of whom his people had conquered and ruled. He saw the anger in their eyes, the fear, the hope. He took a breath and spoke. For 3,000 years, my people have ruled through strength. We believed that the strong had the right to dominate the weak. We fought 47 wars and won them all. We became certain of our superiority. We became arrogant. He paused. The humans taught us we were wrong. He turned to face Park directly. Humanity defeated us not because they were stronger, but because they would not give up. They adapted when we could not. They fought with creativity and courage against impossible odds, and they showed the galaxy what we had tried to hide, that the Velkar could bleed, that the Velkar could lose, that the Velkar could be wrong. Velkar has pulled out a data pad. I come here today with an offer of complete ceasefire. All Velkar military forces will withdraw from occupied territories. We will face a war crimes tribunal for our actions. We will release all vassal species from their obligations. The age of Velkar dominance is over. The chamber erupted in shock and debate. Some species cheered. Others argued. The idea that the Velkar were actually surrendering seemed too good to be true. Park watched Velkaris carefully. He had learned to read alien body language over his years as a diplomat. The young Velkar was sincere but also afraid. He was taking a huge risk coming here, admitting weakness. It took courage. The human delegation accepts your offer of ceasefire, Park said formally. But we have conditions for lasting peace. They talked for hours. The negotiations were difficult but honest. In the end, they agreed on terms. The Velkar would face justice, but they would not be destroyed. They would become just another species in the council, with the same rights and responsibilities as everyone else. Not everyone was happy with this. General Bae Sunho, watching the proceedings from Earth, felt anger burning in his chest. They killed thousands of our people. They destroyed our colonies. And we're just letting them walk away? Dr. Choi Minji sat with him in the military command center. We're not letting them walk away. They're facing consequences. But we're also not becoming them. The Velkar ruled through fear and violence. If we do the same, we just continue the cycle. Bae wanted to argue, but he knew she was right. He had seen too much death in this war. If there was a chance for real peace, he had to take it, even if it felt unsatisfying. On New Busan, which was being rebuilt, Private Yoon Dae-hyun worked alongside Chirik laborers who were now free workers, paid for their services. He still had nightmares about the battle, but working with his hands helped. Building instead of destroying. A Chirik named Klikthar approached him. This was the same Chirik that Dr. Minji had first contacted, the one who had led the resistance against the Velkar. Human Daehyun, Klikthar clicked. I want to say thank you. My people are free because yours showed us freedom was possible. Daehyun did not know what to say. He had just been a soldier doing his duty. But he nodded and shook the Chirik's offered claw. Build something good with your freedom, he said. Fighter pilot Song Hana had survived the battle but barely. Her fighter had been destroyed and she had spent 2 weeks in an escape pod before being rescued. Now she was back on Earth working as an instructor. The Galactic Council had asked humanity to help train defense forces for other species. Species that had never really learned to fight because the Velkar had always protected or threatened them. It was strange. Teaching aliens to fly and fight using human tactics. But they were eager students. They wanted to learn the secret of how humanity had won. There's no secret, Hana told her class of mixed species pilots. We just refused to quit. When the Velkar said we would lose, we said we would try anyway. When they said resistance was impossible, we resisted. You don't need to be the strongest. You just need to keep going when others give up. The Galactic Council held a special session to address humanity's new role in galactic affairs. Speaker Thal made an announcement that would reshape politics for generations. The Council recognizes that the old order has fallen. The age of domination by single species must end. We propose new principles for galactic civilization, based on the example humanity has shown us. The right of all species to self-determination. The laws of war that protect civilians. The duty of the strong to protect, not exploit, the weak. Humanity was granted a permanent seat on the Galactic Council's Security Committee. More importantly, the Council adopted a new charter, one that included ideas from human history about rights and justice and the limits of power. Ambassador Park stood before the Council one more time to give his acceptance speech. Humanity did not want this war. We wanted peace, but when peace was denied to us, we fought. Not because we loved violence, but because we loved freedom. Today we accept this responsibility not as conquerors, but as partners. We will work with all of you to build a galaxy where might does not make right, where justice is stronger than fear, where every species, no matter how small or young, has a voice." The applause was thunderous. Back on Earth, Admiral Han Jisoo visited the memorial that had been built for all those who died in the war. Captain Lee Ji-won's name was there, carved in stone along with thousands of others. Han placed a flower at the base of the memorial. "We won," she said quietly to the memory of her friend. "But the cost was high. I hope we remember that. I hope we never forget what it takes to stand up to tyrants." Engineer Kang Sora, who had survived the battle, stood beside her. "Captain Ji-won used to say that humans were good at impossible things. I think she was right." "She was," Han agreed. "And now the galaxy knows it too." The war had changed everything. The Velkar were no longer the feared rulers of the galaxy. Dozens of species were free for the first time in centuries. New alliances were forming. New possibilities were opening. And humanity, the young species that had been in space for barely 50 years, had become one of the most respected civilizations in the galaxy. Not because they were the strongest, but because when faced with impossible odds, they had stood firm. They had adapted. They had sacrificed. They had won. O Taejin, the old historian, wrote a book about the war. It became required reading in schools across human space and was translated into 100 alien languages. The final chapter was titled, "The Most Important Lesson." It read, "The Velkar learned the hard way what every bully eventually learns. That strength alone is not enough. That fear is not respect. That winning battles is not the same as winning peace. They learned that no matter how powerful you are, somewhere there will be someone who refuses to bow. And if that someone is human, you had better be ready for the fight of your life. Because humans do not know how to give up. It is not in their nature. They will find a way or they will make a way, but they will never ever simply surrender to injustice. The galaxy is better now because the Velkar picked a fight with humanity. Not because humanity destroyed them, but because humanity showed everyone, including the Velkar, that there was a better way, that peace built on respect is stronger than peace built on fear, that the arc of history can bend toward justice, if enough people are willing to stand up and bend it.